Imagine you are standing deep inside a pristine, untouched temperate forest. The canopy above filters the afternoon sunlight into long, golden beams cutting through the mist. To human senses, it is the epitome of absolute peace. But if you could tap into the sensory frequency of the creatures surrounding you, you would realize that you have just stepped into a war zone. 50 yards away, a massive bull elk freezes mid-stride. Every muscle in its body locks up like coiled steel. It isn't looking at you. It might not even be able to see you clearly through the dense fern brush. But it doesn't need to. It catches a faint microscopic whisper on the moving air, or hears the unnaturally heavy crunch of a boot heel on dry twigs, and instantly, its ancient survival software reboots. Without a sound, it detonates into the brush, running for its life. A few feet above you on an oak branch, a gray squirrel stops grooming, stares wildly into the empty space, twitches its tail in a frenzy of pure panic, and bolts upward into the safety of the leaves. To you, you are just an exhausted hiker trying to catch your breath and enjoy a quiet afternoon. To the forest, you are an eldritch horror, a walking anomaly that defies every rule of the natural world. Why? Why do creatures with razor-sharp talons, bone-crushing jaws, venom potent enough to drop an elephant, and speed that defies gravity turn into trembling cowards the moment a soft, slow, hairless biped walks into their neighborhood? The answer doesn't lie in what humans are doing today. It goes back millions of years into a shadowy evolutionary past, etching a universal law into the DNA of every living vertebrate. Humans equal death. To understand why a mouse, a deer, and a grizzly bear react to humans with the exact same primal terror, we have to look past modern civilization and travel back to the Pleistocene. For a very long time, evolutionary biologists suffered from a blind spot. They assumed that prey animals only experienced fear when an apex predator, like a saber-toothed cat or a dire wolf, was actively chasing them down. When the predator left the immediate area, the prey relaxed, grazed peacefully, and forgot about the danger. But modern ecology shattered that comforting illusion with a concept known as the landscape of fear. Animals don't just react to immediate attacks. They map out their entire reality around the probability of danger. Every blade of grass they eat, every hour they sleep, and every watering hole they visit is filtered through a constant, hypervigilant risk calculation. And for the last 2 million years, the single most lethal variable in that calculation has been the genus Homo. Long before we invented bronze swords, gunpowder, or iron traps, our ancestors mastered a terrifying evolutionary cheat code: endurance hunting. While a cheetah or a leopard could explode into blinding speeds, they would burn through their energy reserves in seconds and have to give up the chase if the prey outlasted them. Early humans didn't work that way. We were the relentless ghosts of the savannah. We tracked prey across miles of searing heat, never running fast enough to make them panic instantly, but never stopping long enough for them to rest. We just kept walking, and tracking, and walking. Imagine being an antelope on an ancient African plain, looking back over your shoulder every 10 minutes and seeing the exact same two-legged shapes jogging after you at a steady, unchanging, robotic pace. Hour after hour, under the blinding sun. It is a psychological torture chamber. Eventually, the animal's body would shut down from heat exhaustion and sheer lactic acid buildup, collapsing into the dust. Natural selection performed a brutal sorting process here. The gazelles that were curious about the weird walking apes got eaten. The ones that panicked at the mere silhouette of a human shape ran 10 miles away, and taught their offspring to do the same survived. Repeat that ruthless filter across hundreds of thousands of generations, and you get what we see today: a biological security system hard-coded into animal DNA. Fear of humans isn't something an animal learns from experience. It is factory-installed firmware. You might think, fine, prey animals are scared of us because we eat them. But surely apex predators, animals at the very top of the food chain, look at us and laugh. In reality, the exact opposite is true. In a stunning study conducted by wildlife ecologists at the University of Western Ontario, researchers decided to test how top-tier carnivores respond to human presence. They set up automated audio boxes in deep wilderness areas and played recordings of various sounds. They didn't play gunshots or hunting noises. They didn't play the roars of rival animal competitors. They played the most boring audio imaginable: casual, normal human conversation. Just people chatting idly about grocery shopping or the weather, recorded at a low conversational volume. The results were nothing short of staggering. Mountain lions, apex predators that routinely ambush deer and dominate their local ecosystems, fled from the sound of talking humans at more than double the rate they fled from the roars of competing lions or wolves. Bobcats, coyotes, badgers, and raccoons bolted away from human voices faster than from any other natural threat. Think about the sheer evolutionary absurdity of that moment. A massive, muscular cougar, an animal built entirely of razor blades and stealth that can leap 20 feet through the air, sprinting away in sheer, unadulterated terror simply because it heard two people discussing what to make for dinner. Why do they do this? Because apex predators have a long, bloody history with us. Whenever large carnivores got too close to our camps, whenever they competed with us for game, or whenever our ancestors wanted to prove a point, we killed them. We used poisoned arrows, coordinated spear walls, fire drives, and rifles. Over millennia, the lions and wolves that chose to stand their ground against humans were systematically wiped out. The ones that inherited a gut-wrenching caution toward human voices survived to pass down their genes. We aren't just scary because we hunt. We are terrifying because we are completely unpredictable. In the natural world, survival depends entirely on pattern recognition. Every animal on Earth relies on predictable rules. A wolf pack hunts during specific dawn and twilight hours. A python lies in wait near riverbanks where mammals come to drink. An owl hunts rodents in open fields under the cover of a new moon. Because these patterns are consistent, prey animals can build mental maps of safety. A deer that knows where the wolf pack rests can safely graze on the opposite side of the ridge. Enter humanity, the ultimate rule breakers of the biosphere. We don't have a hunting season tied to biological clocks. We hunt at dawn, at noon, at midnight, and in the pitch black of a winter night. We hunt in massive groups or completely alone. We don't just use teeth and claws. We use compound bows, silent crossbows, high-powered rifles with thermal scopes, mechanical steel traps, trained tracking hounds, and drones flying silently overhead. We hunt on dry land, dive deep into the ocean to spear fish, and track animals from the sky. Furthermore, we kill things we don't even eat. We kill animals because they ate our crops, because we wanted their fur, because they looked dangerous, or purely by accident while driving a steel machine down a highway. From an animal's perspective, humans are an unsolvable mathematical chaos equation. We violate every natural law of ecology. And when an animal brain encounters an erratic variable that defies prediction, the evolutionary algorithm defaults to the safest possible command. Flee immediately, and do not look back. We don't fit into any psychological category. We smell like synthetic chemicals, we wear bright unnatural colors, we move with awkward jerky gaits, and then, in a bizarre plot twist, we occasionally sit quietly in a park handing out roasted peanuts to squirrels. It completely short-circuits their cognitive frameworks. There is also another hidden sensory weapon we carry around every single second of the day, one that wildlife researchers have documented with chilling clarity. Our body odor is chemically terrifying. Modern humans walk through nature surrounded by an invisible cloud of synthetic chemistry. Deodorants, laundry detergents laced with optical brighteners, artificial shampoos, plastic fibers in our clothes, and the lingering exhaust of combustion engines create an olfactory signature that is utterly alien to the natural world. Even if you strip away all civilization and stand naked in the woods, natural human sweat is laced with unique metabolic compounds that scream danger to mammalian olfactory bulbs. In wildlife conservation, foresters often spray synthetic predator urine around young tree saplings to deter deer from eating them. When scientists tested how wildlife responds to pure human scent, the results were jaw-dropping. Researchers placed cloth strips soaked in human sweat near remote trail cameras in protected wilderness areas. The drop in local animal traffic was identical, and sometimes greater, than the drop caused by placing actual mountain lion scent in the same spot. Let that sink deep into your mind. Simply existing, breathing, and sweating while walking through a forest makes you smell roughly as threatening to local wildlife as an active, hunting apex predator. You are a walking biological hazard zone. If this deep-seated fear of humans is truly written into our biological history, what happens when you drop humans into an ecosystem where the local animals have never met us before? The historical and scientific record gives us a breathtaking answer. Complete, utter fearlessness. When early explorers first landed on isolated oceanic islands like the Galapagos, Mauritius, or remote subantarctic landmasses, they encountered a surreal paradise. Sailors stepped off ships and found native land birds walking right up to their boots, tilting their heads in innocent curiosity. They could reach out and pick birds up off the ground with their bare hands. The famous, tragic dodo bird of Mauritius is the most heartbreaking example of this. Early Dutch sailors described dodos walking trustingly toward hunting parties, showing zero instinct to flee. Arrogant sailors mocked the birds, calling them terminally stupid. They weren't stupid at all. They were simply living in a prelapsarian world, an ecosystem where no bipedal, tool-using superpredator had ever set foot. They hadn't been given the evolutionary history lesson that every other animal on Earth inherited. They trusted because they had no reason not to, a fatal innocence that we exploited to total extinction within a few short decades. Even today, in protected marine zones where commercial fishing has been strictly outlawed for decades, fish populations undergo a dramatic psychological shift. Diverse and protected coral reefs often report that local groupers and reef sharks will actively swim toward them out of sheer curiosity, while fish in adjacent, unprotected fishing zones streak away like lightning the moment a human shadow hits the water. When early explorers first landed on isolated oceanic islands like the Galapagos, Mauritius, or remote subantarctic landmasses, they encountered a surreal paradise. Sailors stepped off ships and found native land birds walking right up to their boots, tilting their heads in innocent curiosity. They could reach out and pick birds up off the ground with their bare hands. The famous, tragic dodo bird of Mauritius is the most heartbreaking example of this. Early Dutch sailors described dodos walking trustingly toward hunting parties, showing zero instinct to flee. Arrogant sailors mocked the birds, calling them terminally stupid. They weren't stupid at all. They were simply living in a prelapsarian world, an ecosystem where no bipedal, tool-using superpredator had ever set foot. They hadn't been given the evolutionary history lesson that every other animal on Earth inherited. They trusted because they had no reason not to, a fatal innocence that we exploited to total extinction within a few short decades. Even today, in protected marine zones where commercial fishing has been strictly outlawed for decades, fish populations undergo a dramatic psychological shift. Diverse and protected coral reefs often report that local groupers and reef sharks will actively swim toward them out of sheer curiosity, while fish in adjacent, unprotected fishing zones streak away like lightning the moment a human shadow hits the water. An invisible ecological architect that physically reshapes entire landscapes. Look at what happened in Yellowstone National Park after wolves were reintroduced in 1995. The local elk population didn't just decline in numbers. Their behavior underwent a radical transformation. Elk stopped lingering in wide-open river valleys where they were vulnerable. They avoided steep stream banks and spent less time grazing in the open sunlight. Because the elk were suddenly terrified of lingering by the rivers, the willow and aspen trees along the waterbanks stopped being overgrazed. The trees grew tall and thick. Their roots stabilized the eroding riverbanks. Beavers returned because they had wood to build dams, which created wetlands. Songbirds came back, and fish populations soared because the shaded water became cool and clean. The psychological terror of the wolf brought an entire dead ecosystem back to life. Now, apply that exact same mechanism to humanity on a global scale. When humans move into an area, whether as logging crews, hikers, hunters, or suburban developers, that exact same fear cascade triggers across every species present. Animals change their migration routes, abandon fertile feeding grounds during daylight hours, and permanently alter their daily schedules. A landmark global study published in the journal Science revealed that mammals across all 6 inhabited continents have undergone a massive behavioral shift. They have become strictly nocturnal. Animals that evolved to thrive in broad daylight, deer, lions, coyotes, boars, are cramming their entire active lives into the pitch-black hours of the night. Why? Not because their biology changed, but because humans are around during the day. The mere passive breathing presence of our species has forced global wildlife onto a graveyard shift, completely rewriting the circadian rhythms of planet Earth. Given how deeply terrified animals are of us, it raises a logical question. If they are so scared, why do animals ever attack humans? The answer is simple. An animal never attacks out of confidence or casual aggression. it attacks out of absolute, unmitigated panic. Almost every single dangerous wildlife encounter boils down to one of three desperate scenarios. The trap, where the animal feels entirely cornered, with zero escape routes left open, leaving violence as its final mathematical option. The cradle, where the animal is a mother whose maternal instincts perceive you as an immediate threat to her helpless offspring. Or the squeeze, where human sprawl has fragmented their territory so drastically that the animal is starving, stressed, and forced into unavoidable close contact with human backyards. When a wild animal with zero options left is startled at close range, its brain stops processing caution and floods with pure adrenaline. It does not attack because it wants to hunt you. It attacks because it believes you are about to end its life, and it is fighting for its last breath. As we dig deeper into the historical record of human expansion across every continent, we find that our shadow preceded our physical arrival by thousands of years. Long before Europeans set foot in the Americas or humans crossed the land bridges into distant continents, local megafauna had already begun shifting their behaviors, adapting their breeding seasons, and retreating into deep forest cover. We were not merely participants in the ecosystems we entered. We were radical architectural shocks that forced every vertebrate organism to rewrite its evolutionary manual. Consider the vast expanse of the Eurasian taiga and the deep forests of prehistoric Europe. In these frigid zones, early human groups did not just hunt for sustenance. They competed directly with cave bears, giant lions, and hyenas for prime cave real estate. Caves were warm, defenseless against the elements, and strategic vantage points. When early humans laid claim to a cave system, they brought fire, smoke, organized group defense, and stone weaponry. The message sent to the apex predators of the Ice Age was unmistakable. We are not just another animal sharing the territory. We are an entirely new tier of dominant force that displaces everything in its path. This deep historical friction created what modern paleobiologists call the ultimate behavioral bottleneck. Animals that possessed even a slight mutation toward hypercautious behavior, those that could detect the faint scent of wood smoke from miles away, or recognize the unnatural silhouette of a group of hominids walking in unison, survived glacial winter after glacial winter. Those that were bold, curious, or slow to recognize the threat were systematically culled. This means that the fear response we observe today in modern woodland creatures is actually a meticulously polished evolutionary artifact, surviving the harshest filtering processes the planet has ever known. Let us expand our gaze to the marine ecosystems, where the boundary between human presence and animal terror plays out beneath the waves in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. When we think of marine mammals like whales, dolphins, and seals, we often romanticize their interactions with humanity. We picture gentle encounters, whale-watching boats gliding quietly over blue swells, and dolphins riding the bow waves of fishing vessels. But beneath that veneer of modern ecotourism lies millions of years of profound maritime predation. Early coastal humans were master shellfish gatherers, spearfishers, and coastal hunters. We didn't just stay on dry land. We built rafts, canoes, and primitive watercraft, pushing out into the coastal shelves and shallow bays. To seals hauling themselves onto isolated rocky beaches to rest and breed, the appearance of bipedal figures emerging from the surf with long wooden spears was a recurring nightmare. Modern pinnipeds, seals, sea lions, and walruses retain an acute, hypersensitive wariness of humans on shorelines, instantly stampeding back into the icy safety of the ocean at the first hint of human scent or silhouette. Even cetaceans, the majestic leviathans of the deep oceans, carry an evolutionary memory of coastal whaling and historic shore-based hunting by indigenous populations across the globe. Orcas, sperm whales, and humpbacks exhibit complex social transmission of trauma and avoidance behaviors. When modern research vessels approach certain pods of killer whales in areas with histories of heavy commercial harassment, the animals execute sophisticated evasion maneuvers, communicating distress across miles of open ocean through vocalizations that denote high alert. The ocean is not a neutral theater. It is an aqueous landscape of fear where the shadow of a boat hull is perpetually weighed against the memory of harpoons and steel. To understand the full magnitude of this phenomenon, we must also examine the neurological mechanics happening inside an animal's brain during a human encounter. When a deer freezes on a woodland trail, its amygdala, the ancient emotional and threat detection center of the brain, overrides all other cognitive functions in a fraction of a millisecond. It floods the bloodstream with cortisol and epinephrine, supercharging the muscular system for an explosive flight response. But unlike a standard predator-prey interaction where the animal can eventually outrun a wolf or climb a tree to escape a leopard, human encounters offer no clean tactical resolution. Because humans carry firearms, throw projectiles, track scents across miles, and operate with unpredictable intent, the animal's brain cannot calculate a reliable escape equation.
Should it run left?
Right.
Hide in the thicket. Climb a ridge.
Because humans cover all tactical domains: ground, projectile, and endurance tracking. The animal's nervous system experiences a state of chronic, hyperaroused panic known in behavioral biology as inescapable stress. This chronic activation is precisely why modern wildlife living near suburban fringes suffers from suppressed immune systems, lower reproductive success, and shortened lifespans. Our mere presence acts as a low-grade, invisible chemical poison that disrupts their biological equilibrium. Let us look further at how birds, creatures of the air that seemingly inhabit a completely different physical plane from ground-dwelling humans, respond to our pervasive footprint. Walk through any suburban neighborhood or rural pasture, and you will notice that songbirds scatter instantly when a person approaches, even if that person is walking slowly and making no aggressive gestures. Ornithologists have discovered that avian alarm calls carry hyperspecific semantic information. When a crow or a jay spots a human silhouette, its warning call is distinct from the call used when spotting a hawk or a fox. Crows, ravens, and magpies possess extraordinary cognitive capacities that allow them to categorize human threats down to individual facial recognition, clothing types, and even carrying habits, such as whether a person is holding a walking stick, a camera tripod, or a long wooden pole. Studies conducted across university campuses have proven that crows pass down specific human threat profiles across generations through vocal coaching and social learning. If a researcher wears a specific rubber mask while capturing and banding crows, those crows and their offspring will relentlessly dive-bomb anyone wearing that exact mask for years afterward, completely ignoring other passers-by. This level of sophisticated intergenerational urban surveillance proves that animals do not merely fear humans as a generalized category. They study us, catalog our behaviors, and teach their descendants how to navigate our chaotic civilization. Consider also the profound transformation that occurs when human populations completely vacate an industrial or conflict zone. One of the most striking examples of this in modern history is the Chernobyl exclusion zone in Ukraine. Following the catastrophic nuclear disaster in 1986, humans were entirely evacuated from a massive 1,000 square mile radius. Conventional scientific wisdom at the time predicted a dead, radioactive wasteland devoid of complex biological life. Instead, nature performed one of the most astonishing rebound experiments in planetary history. Within decades, as the direct physical presence of humans vanished, wildlife populations, including wolves, wild boars, lynx, brown bears, and elk, surged in numbers. Without the constant pressure of hunting, poaching, habitat destruction, and daily human disturbance, animals that had been driven to local extinction or extreme rarity returned in abundance. Trail cameras inside the abandoned city of Pripyat captured wolves roaming freely through empty concrete plazas and bears nesting in abandoned apartment buildings. The Chernobyl experiment revealed a stark, undeniable truth. For wild animals, the immediate lethal hazard of human presence is often far more destructive than even low-level environmental radioactivity. When humans step away, the landscape heals, and wildlife rapidly reclaims its ancestral territory. The animals did not need the radiation levels to drop to zero. They simply needed the humans to leave. As we peer even further back into the deep evolutionary timeline, before the rise of modern Homo sapiens, the psychological imprint of our lineage was already casting a long, dark shadow across the Pleistocene landscape. Long before our species emerged in Africa, archaic hominids like Homo erectus and the Neanderthals were actively expanding their ranges, utilizing fire drives, cooperative trapping, and sophisticated stone tool technologies. This meant that the terror associated with bipedal hunters is not a recent invention of modern civilization. It is an ancient inheritance written into the survival software of mammalian brains across hundreds of thousands of years. Every time an archaic hominid set fire to a patch of brush to flush out game, or coordinated a group ambush at a narrow river crossing, they were actively training the local fauna in the brutal mechanics of avoidance. This multi-generational conditioning explains why even isolated animal populations that have never encountered a modern human carrying a firearm or wearing synthetic clothing still exhibit an instinctive wariness of upright silhouettes. The visual profile of a vertical torso balanced on two limbs, moving with purposeful, non-random strides, triggers an ancient neurological alarm bell. Evolution does not waste energy maintaining complex fear responses unless those responses have repeatedly stood between life and death. The fact that modern deer, wild boars, and foxes freeze, sniff the air, and bolt when they catch the faint visual outline of a human standing on a distant ridge is a testament to the enduring power of Pleistocene selection pressures. To fully grasp the magnitude of this ecological phenomenon, we must also examine how plant-eating megafauna interacted with early human hunters during the peak of the last ice age. In prehistoric northern Eurasia and the Americas, massive herds of mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant bison, and mastodons shared the landscape with bands of human hunters. While these creatures were colossal, possessing immense physical strength and formidable tusks or horns, they were not immune to the relentless, strategic persistence of human predation. Unlike lions or wolves, which attacked through direct physical confrontation and risked severe injury, human hunters utilized distance weapons, organized pitfalls, and the psychological terror of fire. When early human groups targeted megafauna, they targeted the young, the old, or the isolated individuals, gradually fracturing the social cohesion of large herds. The psychological trauma inflicted upon these massive herbivores was profound. Paleolithic art found deep inside European cave systems, such as the haunting charcoal and ochre paintings of wounded beasts, charging mammoths, and masked hunters, offers a direct window into this primal relationship. These weren't merely decorative drawings or spiritual rituals. They were visual records of a high-stakes ecological struggle where humans were recognized not as passive participants in the food web, but as supreme shapers of destiny. Moving from the terrestrial realm back to our modern world, we can observe how this ancient dynamic continues to play out in our relationship with urban and suburban wildlife. Today, animals like raccoons, coyotes, foxes, and deer have learned to navigate the edges of human civilization, scavenging our garbage, living in our green spaces, and utilizing highway culverts as transit corridors. To the casual observer, it might look like these animals have conquered their fear of us, that they have adapted to our presence and accepted us as benign neighbors. But behavioral ecologists call this urban tolerance a veneer of convenience masking deep, chronic hypervigilance. Urban coyotes, for example, are absolute masters of stealth. They live right in the middle of sprawling metropolitan areas, sharing neighborhoods with millions of people, yet most residents never see a single one. These urban predators hunt almost exclusively in the dead of night, hide in impenetrable brush during daylight hours, cross roads only when traffic drops to a minimum, and teach their pups to remain entirely silent around human habitation. They haven't lost their fear of us. Rather, they have perfected an invisible, ghost-like coexistence. They treat human neighborhoods like a hostile foreign territory, moving through our streets like shadow operators behind enemy lines. Even the humble backyard birds that gather around suburban bird feeders exhibit this relentless hyper-awareness. Watch a flock of sparrows or pigeons feeding on seeds scattered across a lawn. Every few seconds, without any apparent trigger, the entire flock will suddenly erupt into the air, scattering into nearby trees in a chaotic burst of wings. A moment later, they will cautiously flutter back down. What caused that sudden panic? A distant car door slamming, a shadow shifting across a window, or the faint vibration of footsteps on pavement. To these birds, the human world is an incessant series of potential lethal threats disguised as everyday background noise. Their nervous systems operate on a hair-trigger sensitivity where peace is merely an illusion and danger is perpetually imminent. Consider also the profound implications this has for how we manage global conservation and wildlife corridors in the 21st century. For decades, conservationists focused primarily on physical habitat loss, protecting the sheer square acreage of forests, wetlands, and grasslands from bulldozers, logging, and agricultural conversion. While preserving physical space is undeniably critical, modern ecology reveals that protecting physical space is useless if the psychological space is completely saturated by human disturbance. If a wildlife reserve is legally protected from logging, but is constantly buzzed by tourist drones, surrounded by noisy highways, and infiltrated by hikers shouting and playing music, the animals inside that reserve still experience the exhausting, immune-suppressing toll of the landscape of fear. True conservation requires us to rethink our entire approach to human-wildlife boundaries. It demands the creation of genuine dark zones, quiet sanctuaries where human foot traffic is strictly regulated or entirely excluded, allowing mammalian nervous systems to finally power down their hypervigilant alarm systems. When we grant animals true psychological safety, their reproductive rates rebound, their immune systems stabilize, and the natural behavioral rhythms that govern their ancestors for millions of years begin to restore themselves. As we look toward the future of our planet, the story of animal fear is ultimately a mirror reflecting our own profound impact on the biosphere. We are not just another species sharing the woods. We are the primary architects of planetary anxiety. Every sound we make, every chemical scent we shed, and every boundary we expand sends ripples of caution through the nervous systems of every vertebrate creature on Earth. Yet, within that sobering reality lies an extraordinary opportunity. The same unmatched intelligence and ecological awareness that allowed our ancestors to outlast the Ice Age now gives us the unprecedented capacity to soften our footprint. By learning to balance our presence with genuine ecological empathy, we can begin to heal the fractured relationship between humanity and the wild, moving toward a future where the forest no longer has to tremble at the mere whisper of our name.